This is Tony T here from TonySpicks.com with our college football pick show. This is week 12, part 1. We'll have 15 games here in part 1. You know, there's 50 games on Saturday, so we're going to do these in 4 parts. We'll have them done by Thursday night. We should have all 50 done. For more free pick videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Lots of free picks over our channel for myself and our team of cappers here at TonySpicks.com, making it a great channel to subscribe to. Hit us up with that like, that thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. Then visit our site, TonySpicks.com. We are a multi-capper site showcasing top performers in our industry. Click the links to the hot cappers, get signed to along our passes. You see our top performers here like Sean Higgs, DeAndre, Brian, guys you know from our live show as well as YouTube video. Ron doing great. We see Alessandro up there as well. Latest premium pictures on the page with best bets and more. We will be locked and loaded for this card on Tuesday. Remember, all of our one-day passes are profit guaranteed. They must turn our profit amount purchased is credit back to your account for site credit. That's profit guarantee. And then our promo code TonyT at checkout will knock off that 15%. The link is in the description to get signed up. So let's go ahead. Let's get this one underway. We got UTSA and Charlotte going off here on Saturday. All right, we've got UTSA now 4-5 after their 55-23 road defeat to USF. The Roadrunners rushed for under 2 yards a carry and moved the ball through the air. On defense, they allowed 471 yards by poorly defending the run and pass. Owen McCown completed 16 of 23 passes for 200 yards with a touchdown and pick and took 6 sacks. Charlotte now 1-8 after a 48-22 road defeat to East Carolina. 49ers moved the ball through the air and rushed for only 40 yards. On defense, they held ECU to 5.1 yards a carry with 183 yards rushing for 4.2 yards per attempt here. Grayson Loftus here, 20 of 31 passing for 279 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick. Charlotte has allowed 49 points or greater in 4 of their past 5 games. UTSA has allowed 55 points in 2 of their past 3. And the Roadrunners defense, the AAC, are allowing 6.3 yards per rush and 70% completion rate for 9.2 yards per pass attempt. Charlotte defense at home in conference play, giving up 5.5 yards a carry with 8.5 yards per pass attempt. Pick here will be on UTSA and Charlotte to go over 61. Eastern Michigan and Ball State going off on Saturday. Eastern Michigan now 3-7 after a 27-21 home victory against Bowling Green. The Eagles were inefficient through the air and rushed for 175 yards for 5 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 3.7 yards per rush with 129 yards passing for 8.1 yards per pass attempt. Noah Kim in the game, 22 of 39 passing for 210 yards with a touchdown. Ball State sits at 4-5 after a 17-13 home victory against Kent. Cardinals were limited through the air and rushed for 65 yards for 1.9 yards a carry. On defense, they held the Golden Flashes at 2.8 yards per rush with 212 yards passing for 7.6 yards per pass attempt. Kyle Kelly in the game, 17 of 29 passing for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. EMU is eliminated from bowl consideration, and the Cardinals are 2 wins away from bowl eligibility. Ball State 3-0 at home against the MAC. The Eagles are 0-3 on the road in conference. EMU on the road in conference, allowing 5.5 yards per rush with 7.2 yards per pass attempt, and they struggle with quarterback accuracy. Ball State defensively at home, allowing 3.7 yards per rush with only 55% completion rate. Cardinals are 13-2 the spread at home. We'll take Ball State here plus 2.5. Wisconsin and Indiana going off on Saturday. Wisconsin now 3-6 after a 13-10 home victory against Washington. The Badgers had poor passing but rushed for 157 yards for 3.3 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Huskies' pass game and allowed 117 yards rushing for 3.3 yards per rush. Danny O'Neal was injured, and with Billy Edwards' injury, there could be a third stringer in there. Carter Smith in relief goes 3 of 12 for 8 yards. He rushed for 47 yards and a touchdown. True freshman could start for the Badgers' first and second string as are questionable in this game. Indiana 1-0 after a 27-24 road win at Penn State. Hoosiers had some movement through the air and rushed for 108 yards for 3.5 yards a carry. On defense, they held the Nittany Lions to 3.5 yards per rush with 219 yards passing for 7 yards per pass attempt. Renell Mendoza here, 19 of 30 passing for 218 yards with a touchdown and a pick. Wisconsin's quarterback situation is a massive concern with the true freshman in line to start due to injuries. facing Oregon, Ohio State, and Iowa. The Badgers scored a total of 7 points in those games. Hoosiers have blown out UCLA and Illinois at home by 50 or greater points. Wisconsin on the road in the Big Ten, rushing for 3.2 yards a carry with inaccurate quarterback play. Defensively in conference play, they're allowing 5 yards per rush with 8.6 yards per pass attempt. The Hoosiers are putting up 52 points per game at home against the Big Ten. We'll take Indiana here minus 30.5. USF and Navy going off here on Saturday. Got USF now 7-2 after their 55-23 home victory against UTSA. The Bulls gained 471 yards with strong play in the run and passing game. They limited the Roadrunners to 1.9 yards per rush with 209 yards passing for 7 yards per pass attempt and registered 6 sacks. Byron Brown in the game, 14-15 passing for 239 yards and 2 touchdowns. He rushed for 109 yards and a score. Navy fell to 7-2 with their 49-10 road defeat to Notre Dame. Midshipmen were ineffective through the air and rushed for 206 yards for 4.6 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 502 yards to the Fighting Irish with poor work against the run and pass. Blake Horvath missed the game due to injury. Braxton Woodson, 3 of 8 passing for 22 yards in the game. He rushed for 101 yards and a touchdown. USF defensively on the road is allowing 278 yards passing against the conference, but is rushing for 6.3 yards a carry and 8.4 yards per pass attempt. Navy at home in the AAC rushing for 6 yards a carry with 13.1 yards per pass attempt. The Midshipmen has gone over in 4 of 5. The Bulls have gone over in 6 of 7. Pick here USF and Navy over 64.5. Arizona and Cincinnati going off here on Saturday. Got Arizona now 6-3 after a 24-20 home victory against Kansas. The Wildcats were ineffective through the air and rushed for 165 yards for 5.7 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 4.3 yards per rush with 199 yards passing for 6.6 yards per pass attempt. Noah Fafita here, 16 of 31 passing for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cincinnati is 7-2 with a 45-14 road defeat at Utah. Bearcats had movement in the passing game and rushed for 206 yards for 6.9 yards a carry. On defense, they rushed for 267 yards for 5 yards per run with 213 through the air. Brendan Sorsby in the game, 11 of 33 passing for 221 yards with a touchdown and a pick. So the Bearcats 3-0 at home against the Big 12, winning by 9 points or greater in each game. The Bearcats at home in conference play is rushed for 6 yards a carry with 7.7 yards per pass attempt and defending the pass well. Arizona on the road in conference is allowing 7.8 yards per pass attempt. Their quarterback play in the past 2 games has been subpar. The Wildcats 0-4 the spread as a road underdog of 7 or fewer points. Pick here Cincinnati minus 6.5. Air Force and UConn going off on Saturday. We've got here Air Force now 3-6 after their 26-16 road win at San Jose State. The Falcons were ineffective throwing the football and rushed for 261 yards for 4.1 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 5.5 yards per rush with 341 yards passing for 7.9 yards per pass attempt. Liam in the game here, Starka, 5 of 10 passing for 41 yards and a touchdown. He rushed for 87 yards a score. UConn here, they sit at 7-3 after a 37-34 home victory against Duke. The Huskies had good movement in the passing game and rushed for 156 yards for 5.2 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 4.9 yards per rush with 222 yards passing for 7.2 yards per pass attempt. Joe Fagnano, 27-39 passing for 311 yards with 3 touchdowns. You know, UConn has won every home game. It is back-to-back road games for the Falcons. They are 1-3 on the road as they allow 38 points per game with 6.3 yards per rush and 10.8 yards per pass attempt. UConn at home put up 43 points per game with 5.9 yards per rush, 70% completion rate for 8.9 yards per pass attempt. Pick here will be UConn minus 7. South Carolina and Texas A&M going off on Saturday. We've got South Carolina 3-6 after their 30-14 road defeat to Ole Miss. The Gamecocks were held to 50 yards on the ground and had movement in the passing game. On defense, they allowed 258 yards rushing for 5.7 yards a carry and 7.6 yards per pass attempt. Lenora Sellers in the game, 16 of 30 passing for 180 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. Texas A&M now 9-0 with a 38-17 road win at Missouri. The Aggies gained 464 yards with good work in the run and pass. They limited the Tigers' passing attack and allowed 207 yards rushing for 6.1 yards per carry. Marcel Reed here, 20 of 29 passing for 221 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Aggies have won all 5 home games. South Carolina's lost all 3 road SEC games by 9 or greater points. Gamecocks on the road allowing 5.9 yards per rush with 7.2 yards per pass attempt. On the road, they're rushing for 2.4 yards a carry with inaccurate quarterback play. A&M at home in conference play rushing for nearly 5 yards a carry and averaging 8.7 yards per pass attempt with really good defensive play. They are 6-3 of the spread at home against the SEC. Pick here Texas A&M here minus 19. Michigan and Northwestern going off on Saturday. Michigan now 7-2 after a 21-16 home victory against Purdue. Wolverines were limited through the air and rushed for 253 yards for 6.5 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Boilermakers through the air and allowed 138 yards rushing for 3.5 yards a carry. Bryce Underwood here, 13 of 22 passing for 145 yards and a pick. Northwestern 5-4 with a 38-17 road defeat to USC. The Wildcats were inefficient in the passing game and rushed for 130 yards for 5.2 yards per pass attempt. On defense, they allowed 482 yards to the Trojans by poorly defending the run and pass. Preston Stone in the game, 20 of 30, passing for 150 yards and a touchdown. The game will be played at Wrigley Field. The Wildcats have covered 4 of 5 at home. Wolverines, although it's not a true home game, but we know it's in their area there. Wolverines have failed to cover 4 of 5 away from home. Quarterback accuracy has been an issue for Michigan. The Wildcats are rushing for 4.5 yards a carry against the Big Ten. We'll take Northwestern here, plus 11.5. Notre Dame and Pittsburgh for Saturday. Got Notre Dame now 7-2 after a 49-10 home victory against Navy. The Fighting Irish gained 502 yards with great work in the run and pass. They limited the midshipmen, to 22 passing yards for 206 rushing yards for 4.6 yards a carry. C.J. Carr here, 13 of 16 passing for 218 yards with 3 touchdowns. Pittsburgh now 7-2 after a 35-20 road win at Stanford. The Panthers gained 466 yards with good production in the run and pass. On defense, they held the Cardinals to 10 rushing yards with 336 yards passing for 7.6 yards per pass attempt. Mason Heinschel, 23 of 38 passing for 304 yards with 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. It's 5 straight victories here for the Panthers, showing positive effects with their quarterback change. Notre Dame has won every game since opening the year 0-2. Fine Irish on the road allowing 227 yards passing per game with 6.3 yards per pass attempt. Pittsburgh at home averaging 47 points per game with 4.2 yards per run, 331 yards passing for 8.4 yards per pass attempt. They have defended well at home. The Panthers have covered 5 straight. Notre Dame 3-4 of the spread on the road, facing teams that average 250 yards passing per game or greater. I don't know about Narduzzi's press conference here, but I think he may just play possum here, saying the most important games are ACC games. He just said that on Monday. I don't know. I'll still take Pittsburgh here at plus the 10.5. Kansas State and Oklahoma State going off on Saturday. Kansas State fell to 4-5 after their 43-20 home defeat to Texas Tech. The Wildcats had movement in the passing game and rushed for 126 yards for 4.2 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 436 yards to the Red Raiders by poorly defending the run and pass. Avery Johnson here, 16 of 33 passing for 199 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. He rushed for 88 yards and 2 scores. Oklahoma State drops to 1-8 after their 38-21 road defeat to Kansas. The Cowboys had good movement in the passing game and rushed for 72 yards for 2.3 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Jayhawks passing and allowed 232 yards rushing for 6 yards a carry. Zane Flores here, 22 of 38 passing for 235 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Wildcats have gone over in 5 straight. Oklahoma State has gone over in 3 of 4. The Wildcats on the road rushing for 4.2 yards a carry and averaging 7.2 yards per pass attempt. Oklahoma State at home in the Big 12 is allowing 44 points per game with 69% completion rate for 10 yards per pass attempt. Pick here Kansas State and Oklahoma State over 53. Arkansas and LSU for Saturday. Arkansas fell to 2-7 after their 38-35 home defeats at Mississippi State. The Razorbacks had movement in the passing game and rushed for 239 yards for 5.2 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Bulldogs on the ground and allowed 282 yards for passing for 8.5 yards per pass attempt. Taylon Green here, 19-31 passes for 194 yards with a touchdown. He rushed for 46 yards and a score. LSU drops to 5-4 with a 20-9 road defeat at Alabama. The Tigers had a poor passing performance and rushed for 59 yards for 2.3 yards a carry. On defense, they held the Crimson Tide to 56 rushing yards with 208 yards passing for 8 yards per pass attempt. Garrett Nussmeier here, 18-21 passes for 121 yards. LSU has won 2 of 3 at home. Arkansas 0-3 on the road overall. On the road, they allow 5.7 yards per rush with 259 yards passing for 9 yards per pass attempt. LSU at home limiting opponents to 3.9 yards per run, 5.7 yards per pass attempt. The Tigers 3-0 to the spread at home, facing teams that allow 5.9 yards per play or greater. A major step down in class on defense here, as the Tigers meeting this Arkansas Razorbacks team here. So their defense is definitely a step down on what they've seen of late. Pick here at LSU minus 5.5. West Virginia and Arizona State for Saturday. West Virginia now 4-6 after a 29-22 home victory against Colorado. Mountaineers had movement in the passing game and rushed for 167 yards for 3.2 yards a carry. On defense, they held the Buffs to under 2 yards per rush with 299 yards passing for 8.5 yards per pass attempt. Scotty Fox, 17-28 passed for 202 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. He rushed for 58 yards. Arizona State now 6-3 after a 24-19 road win at Iowa State. The Sun Devils are inefficient through the air and rushed for 290 yards for 6.3 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Cyclones through the air and allowed 150 yards rushing for 4.7 yards a carry. Jeff Sims here, 13-24 passing for 117 yards with a touchdown and a pick. He rushed for 228 yards and 2 scores. It is 2 straight victories for the Mountaineers with improved offensive performance. ASU has struggled on the ground against the conference at home and allowing 65% completion rate. Sims is the backup for the injured Levitt for ASU. Fox also inserted as a starter with the injury to Markle. WVU has covered 4 of 5. Pick here West Virginia plus 11.5. Oregon State and Tulsa for Saturday. Oregon State fell to 2-8 after a 21-17 home defeat to Sam Houston State. The Beavers had movement in the passing game and rushed for 188 yards for 4.7 yards a carry. On defense, they held the Bearcats to 72 yards rushing with 85 through the air, and they still lost the game. How does that happen? Kavari Johnson here, 29-42 passed for 286 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tulsa drops here to 2-7 with their 40-21 road defeat at FAU. Golden Hurricane were inefficient in the passing game and rushed for 196 yards for 3.7 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 4.2 yards per rush with 311 yards passing for 9.7 yards per pass attempt. Baylor Hayes in the game, 24 of 46 passing for 235 yards and 2 picks. He rushed for 47 yards and a touchdown. Oregon State 0-3 on the road as they rushed for 2.4 yards a carry and getting inaccurate play at quarterback. Their defense is allowing 38 points per game with 322 yards passing for 9.8 yards per pass attempt on the highway. Tulsa averaging 7 yards per pass attempt at home and allowing 153 yards passing. Oregon State 0-5 the spread on the road when lying between +3 and -3. Pick here Tulsa +2.5. North Texas and UAB for Saturday. North Texas now 8-1 with their 31-17 home victory, and that was against Navy. The Mean Green gained 324 yards with great work in the run and pass. On a defense, they limited the midshipmen through the air and allowed 311 yards rushing for 7.6 yards per rush. Drew Messamaker here, 19-24 passes for 234 yards. UAB is 3-6 after a 24-17 road defeat to Rice. Blazers were inefficient through the air and rushed for 102 yards for 3.5 yards a carry. On defense, they held the Owls to 41 yards passing with 191 rushing yards for 3.4 yards a carry. Ryder Burton here, 18 of 34 passes for 213 yards and 2 touchdowns. UAB replaced their quarterback and has averaged 18 points per game in their past 2, failing to cover both of them. North Texas in conference play, averaging on the road 44 points per game, 5 yards per run, 74% completion rate for 10.1 yards per pass attempt. On the road in the AAC, they're holding opposing quarterbacks at 53% completion rate. The Mean Green has covered 6 of 7. Pick here in North Texas, minus 18.5. Marshall and Georgia State for Saturday. Marshall fell to 4-5 after their 35-23 home defeat to James Madison. Thundering Herd were inefficient in the passing game and rushed for 248 yards for 4.9 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 4 yards per rush to the Dukes with 270 yards passing for 11 yards per pass attempt. Carlos Del Rio Wilson here, 16 of 35 passes for 154 yards and a touchdown. He rushed for 73 yards. Georgia State drops to 1-8, a 40-27 road defeat to Coastal Carolina. The Panthers had good passing performance and rushed for 130 yards for 3.5 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the chance of clears through the air, but surrendered 324 yards rushing for 6.9 yards per pass attempt. Kevin Brown here, 9 of 12 passes for 116 yards and a touchdown. Marshall 1-2 on the road against the Sun Belt. On the road in conference play, they're allowing 49 points per game with 5.3 yards per rush and 8 yards per pass attempt. They struggle with pass efficiency on the road in the Sun Belt. Georgia State at home in the Sun Belt, throwing for 252 yards a carry and limiting opposing quarterbacks to 61% completion rate. Pick here, Georgia State plus 7.5. For more free pick videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We have lots of free picks on our channel from myself and team of cappers here at Tony'sPicks.com, making it a great channel to subscribe to. Hit us up with that like, that thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. And then visit our site, Tony'sPicks.com, for our best bets, our premium plays in there. And remember, our promo code TonyT at checkout will knock off that 15%. The link is in the description to get signed up. That's going to do it for now. I'm Tony T, and we'll talk with you guys later.